curious with this because does it tell you that I'm actually recording it from your side like it does with Skype?
It does. There's a good old-fashioned macOS style candy button, red light there blinking away saying recording. So I can see that you are recording me. As come one of my cats who has come up to meow at me because, of course, now is the time to come and meow.
Yeah, absolutely. You couldn't time it better, could you? Welcome to the Blockade Bulletin. This is a show put on by Blockade Games to give you a unprecedented insight into the world of blockchain game development and the people that make it happen. So we have certainly got one of those people with us today. We've got Rob Myers, who is our lead blockchain engineer, and we're going to talk about a few of the. Yep, hi Rob. I'm coming through clear, aren't I?
You are.
Brilliant.
You are.
Yeah, so we're going to have a chat about a few of Rob's previous projects and basically what he's been working on at Blockade. So I guess to give a brief bio of Rob. So Rob Myers is an artist, writer and hacker from the UK, now based in Vancouver, British Columbia. An early creative and critical adopter of blockchain. His work centres on the intersection of changing technological aesthetics and social form. Rob's blockchain art projects include Facecoin, blockchain aesthetics, and art world Ethereum. His writing on the subjects include conceptual, art, cryptocurrency, and beyond, blockchain geometries, and the story Bad Sheep, as well as many other titles that we'll be having a look at the end of this. So foremost, what does a lead blockchain engineer actually entail? Maybe some context of some of Blockade's current projects would be helpful.
Certainly. So Blockade makes games. Blockade makes games that are aimed at a general audience that anyone can pick up and play. They have to work simply, they have to work well, and they have to work well integrating the blockchain elements that they use. So my job is to have a good knowledge of the technical side of the blockchain field, to be able to very quickly analyze new technologies as we look at adopting them, find their strengths and weaknesses, work out how to integrate them with what we currently use, and relate that to the sort of business case for using them and the game case for using them. So I've worked on things like the signing of transactions in the back end to make sure that that is frictionless and invisible to the user, unless they want it to be visible to them, in which case we obviously support people using their own wallets and moving their tokens onto mainnet. I've worked on integrating different chains into that system, and when we've been talking to potential partners or looking at new needs for technology, I will go in and do a deep dive on what's involved in taking on board that new technology. So it's a role that involves looking around, looking ahead, and then very quickly being able to just glue new things together in such a way that they won't fall apart.
So I guess looking at, or going back to the bio that I read through, it looks like that you've been looking ahead for quite a long time before actually your work at Blockade.
Yes, I was on a call with Marguerite the other day, and she said, and Rob has been doing this since 2014, and I thought, no, that can't be right. I'm not sure Ethereum was even a thing in 2014, but I look back and no, for whatever reason, I was a relatively late adopter of Bitcoin. Like everyone I've spoken to, I had the usual hero's journey path of sort of encountering Bitcoin, thinking, hey, this is great, I should probably look at it at some point, and then ignoring it, and then rediscovering it sort of several mining years later when it was sort of more popular. And with Ethereum, it's a sort of Vitalik and people just started talking about it at the point where I'd realized that I had ignored something interesting with Bitcoin, and I'd looked at how Bitcoin's scripting system works and realized it had no loops, and I looked at Ethereum, and my mental model of Ethereum immediately became Bitcoin with loops in the programming sense, where you can sort of do something again and again and again rather than just doing one thing as you do without them. And it just struck me as a different way of communicating, a different way of sending information between parties, a different way of sending value between parties. And I went down that rabbit hole. And the way I explain the world to myself, the way I understand things, the way I learn new things, is by using them to make some kind of art with it. So that was the natural outcome of encountering Ethereum, and sort of at various rates of speed over the last few years, as I've had other things on or not, I've been working through pretty much the project that I set myself sort of during that initial encounter, which is now finally finished, and I'm sort of moving on to other still blockchain artistic investigations.
Yeah, no, I find myself going off script already, but like going back to a conversation we had actually prior to recording this, you were talking about
Yes.
open source software, and a lot of the engineers that I know that
Yes.
work with blockchain technology actually also come from that background. They're all, and obviously, you know,
Yes.
saying that a lot of the stuff that or a lot of the essays that you write go into a lot of the social aspects or the ideological aspects of blockchain technology.
Yes.
I was just wondering what came before your work with, or what came before Ethereum, or because you said that you were quite a late advocate.
Yes,
what happened before that?
So yeah, I mean, yes. So technically speaking, immediately before Ethereum was bots, I was involved in a social bot startup. I wrote bots that still tweet sort of very simple artwork ideas, and then there's a sort of very haughty critic bot which says this is amazing or this is terrible, based on a sort of toy critical brain that it's got. It just gives different words different scores and adds them up, which is a sort of satire of various ideas in the history of art around having any kind of objective measure of how good art is. And the thread that has gone through all of that is, as you mentioned, the open source side of things, being involved with free software. And that's a curious contrast in some ways to the blockchain, because free software is very much the idea that you have a commons of software, or if you have a community of software users who are trying not to exclude each other from being able to use software, who are trying to help each other use software, and are trying to share that value. Whereas blockchain technology, once you're on chain, you are very, very, very much about making more certain than is humanly possible that nobody else can own the thing that you own. So with free software, you put your software under a free license and send it out to the world. With the blockchain, you very, very carefully secure your private keys in a bunker or sealed lockbox or filing cabinet under your bed. Then use this information very secretly and very privately to make sure that no one else can steal your coins. So, like the continuity between that, the shared thing, is different ideas of ownership and different ideas of how that ownership relates to a wider community, because you can own all the Bitcoin in the world. There's no use to them if no one else will accept them. But as traditional economists are always very, very keen to make it clear whenever they discover Bitcoin. So that's one side of it. And then, because you need that security with the blockchain, you need to be able to trust the software. And free software, open source software, makes sure that everyone can look at the software, everyone can improve it, everyone can find bugs in it, everyone can share the results of finding those bugs, rather than simply exploit them to steal everyone else's coins. And so, you know, on a different level, there's a direct continuity between the need to build trust in communities of software users with free software and open source software, and the need to build trust in the software and its security in order to be able to pass value through the community of cryptocurrency users. And that social side of things interests me partly because of my educational background. I went to art school, and then my MA was an art and technology MA, so I sort of very quickly pivoted from trying to make prints work to trying to make HTML and CSS and C work in the later 1990s. And it's sort of, the journey in retrospect seems obvious to me, but it is an unusual one, and it's one that does have these apparent contradictions of going through a completely open world to a very sort of secretly secured world.
And that I guess that going back to another previous conversation you were saying about art institutions now coming around to the idea of as you said, to those that operate with this technology, it's very clear the route that's been taken, but to the broader art world, this is still breaking new ground.
Yes. Yeah, and I work with a wonderful gallery and art outfit in the UK called Furtherfield, who are based in Finsbury Park, and they've been tracking, as they put it, art technology and social change for over 20 years now, and they were very, very good at listening to me when I wouldn't shut up to them about how amazing blockchain is and how they should probably look at, even as I more or less put it to them at the time, even if it doesn't sort of take over the world, how it reflects people's desires for a different kind of relation to value and to how we sort of treat paying each other for the work that we do. And they sort of, I saw you've got a copy of Artists Rethinking the Blockchain there, which is the book that they published. And so yeah. It's a lovely. You can download the PDF legally for free, and I do recommend people do that. The book itself is a lovely artifact, so I recommend if anyone can afford that, do get it, because it's nice and glossy and colourful on different pages. But so sort of institutions like Furtherfield, who watch for new developments in art, we're looking at the blockchain, relating it to other trends in art, sort of questions around the globalized art market, because the art world and the art market is as global as the shipping container network now, and sort of probably actually if you map them, you'd find that sort of art does go occasionally by shipping container and not by private jet. But yeah, there's lots of comparisons there. So you've had institutions which have been doing this work, the Serpentine Gallery in the UK as well, sort of started taking notice. And then you get the art institutions whose job is to do what they've always done, which is to survive for hundreds of years and ensure that the public have access to whatever is regarded as the greatest examples of historical art over time. And those institutions have a chemist's knowledge of how paint is made. They have the sort of world-class lawyer's knowledge of how the title to an artwork works, and they have all this expertise, which is entirely valid, and it's wonderful that they assemble and maintain this expertise. But you then go up to them and say, "Hi, I would like to sell you this token which represents this image, which is part of this bit of software that runs on the blockchain," and you have to explain so many things to them, because we all had to learn these things when we first encountered the blockchain, and then we've had to sort of deepen them as sort of smart contracts and zero knowledge proofs and every other new development that's come up. But yeah, trying to explain to world-class art institutions what they are actually buying and what they can say to their trustees or in their press releases that they've bought, and how it doesn't look like they've bought the emperor's new clothes.
Yeah.
I spoke to an artist who was doing that with a really world-class institution, and it took so long to answer all their questions, to reassure their lawyers, to provide the information the institution needed to feel rightly secure that they were actually buying and presenting what they thought they were buying and presenting.
Yeah, it's a whole new level to, or all new questions about trust and building trust.
Yes. Ironically, for a supposedly trustless technology.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's a. Yeah, I saw this podcast as being maybe a 15-minute long affair, maybe 20, but I can see this being a lot longer. Maybe we should bring this back into the Blockade fold a bit. otherwise we will just be we've opened a Pandora's box almost. Yeah. So I mean, there is a project that really defines this point, but what brought you into the fold with Blockade? And I kind of know exactly what you're going to say here. It's going to be. Is it the painting?
Yes,
is it that painting?
So the painting that actually brought me into contact with Marguerite was the first one I think that she did, which was the portrait with the squares around it. And I saw that on Twitter and I thought, hey, that looks good. And as one does with Twitter, I then went on to the next message and responded wittily to someone and sort of liked something and retweeted something else and then forgot about it. And then, however many days or weeks later, Marguerite retweeted the solution to the entire puzzle, which someone had written and assembled into a PDF. And I was like, oh, there was a rabbit hole there. There was this whole series of puzzles leading to this amazing Minecraft world at the end. And this entire community just spontaneously organized itself around this, this very engaging puzzle. And I spoke to Marguerite about it at the time, and sort of we were using the term augmented reality game, which alternate reality game, but whatever cicada was, the where you sort of chase a series of clues to get to a prize. And so I thought that was great, and we got talking. And then when Marguerite was doing the next puzzle trail, she said, do you want to help? And I was like, yes, please. I feel really dumb for missing out on the previous ones. This would be great. And I did a couple of puzzles to Marguerite's specification with things like there was a message encoded using an unusual cipher that you had to work out what the cipher was. There's another one where the message was encoded in the white space of the message. So however hard you tried to decrypt the letters, you actually had to work out that the space characters were different horrific Unicode characters, which look like a single space, but which actually have completely different significance. And then after a while, Marguerite said that they wanted to do a painting as the final thing, and we were worried that some of the previous puzzles had been too easy. So I said, okay, well let's do something with a few more states to each element. So if you imagine with computers, you have binary code, you have zeros and ones. Everyone knows to look for zeros and ones. Everyone knows to look for encoding of letters in zeros and ones. Everyone knows to look for Morse code encoded in zeros and ones. Everyone looks for zeros and ones. And however you looked at our previous puzzles that we worked on, they were generally zero, at some level they're strings of zeros and ones. So I just wanted to hide this a little bit. So I came up with an encoding on the theme that Marguerite had for the painting, which was to use the flames around the edge to encode the message. And I worked out a system which encoded, I think it was 6 bits of information in 2 rows of flames around the edge. So the flame could be tall or short, it could be red or blue, and then it could have a little flame inside it, which was tall or short or red. So maybe it was 4 bits, or it was, sorry, so long since I've thought about this because I had to very carefully forget it for a long time in case anybody else tried to grab clues from me. So anyway, we encoded the private key with a message at the start which told you, yeah, you've cracked this, now keep reading. And then just to make it a little bit harder, we put a 6-bit key, so like 6 zeros and ones, literally on a key in the painting. And all you had to do is use the XOR operation, which everybody knows from their studies of cryptography, to XOR the code that you got from the edge, and then you've got the message confirming that you solved this, and you can grab the key. And for whatever reason, this was just complex enough that it took people 2 years to solve. Was it 2 years to solve it? And I've spoken to people since who are so close to the solution. And when I first met Ben, when Ben and Marguerite said, you should come and work with us, Ben showed me his wonderful visualization of the flames around the edge, and it was actually much more detailed than the description I've given to Marguerite, which for all the world looked like an old 1960s computer paper printout of tall flame red, short flame blue, just so that it was something that could be read and sort of crossed out carefully as Marguerite painted it. I think 160 flames, which she did perfectly. And so, yeah, I felt a bit guilty that people put all this wonderful coding and design work into trying to crack it. But yeah, I mean, sitting there, and Marguerite would contact me every few months and sort of send me highlights of the conversation around it. And sort of people trying to treat the chessboard as a QR code, or try and work things out from like where the doves were looking and that kind of thing. And I was just sat there thinking, it's a key. The key is a key. It's not hiding. There's literally a key there with the key on it. And then I was really relieved when someone cracked it.
So I guess since creating a puzzle that would probably put Ready Player One's James Halliday to shame, have you embarked on any other puzzles since obviously that piece?
So after that, I did help out on a couple of other puzzles with Marguerite. I think there was a Serial Experiments Lane inspired one, which we like sort of being a bit sort of burnt by how difficult the painting had been. We were like, well, let's make this not too difficult, and then people cracked that very quickly because the code was encoded as sort of red and green candle price charts on screens in the background of the painting. And I've just finished working on a really wonderful project with Josie Bellini, which is their Yours Truly project. I took over from Ben, who was the original tech lead on that, when Ben had to go and work on some of the other great projects Blockade's doing at the moment. And so I helped some of the parties involved with that come up with puzzles. I made the Neon District puzzle for that, and I sort of came up with the system for checking your answers without giving too much away, which people had to enter things into. And to my relief, that part of it didn't break because it was a bit fiddly and not sort of, it was written towards the end of the project. So I was relieved that worked. But that was wonderful, coming up with puzzles for sort of NFT sites or 3D immersive games. They'll have very different things that you have as resources available to them. So if you're in the voxel world, you have voxels for free. If you're in a rare art site, then you have lots and lots of wonderful rare art drawings and prints and whatever else has been tokenized on there, and then sort of finding things which are neither sort of too obvious or that reduce to trying to get someone to guess what number you're thinking of, which is always a very frustrating style of puzzle solving. So making it so that there's a trail of like small logical leaps, or a trail of the assembly of various clues, which if you have a thesaurus and can sort of Google the rest of it, you should logically be able to piece together without saying, no, that's not a thing. So yeah, that was great fun, and I am unpuzzled at the moment, but I do always enjoy helping come up with puzzles. It's both the creativity of it and the social side of it is really, really fun.
Yeah, because I mean, if talking about a Ready Player One reality, Josie's puzzle really was that, looking at the the amount of different NFTs that were supported. Literally, that's it's a multiverse experience essentially. Yes. And where does that puzzle sit?
I can't speak for Josie. I do think multiverse. I do think a multiverse kind of experience was what she was going for. So it's good that comes through. Yes.
And in terms of the puzzle being solved, if you could call it that, is where does that currently sit? If you know off the top of your head, because I know that in previous podcasts we have been talking about it quite a bit, but with limited information.
Yeah. So someone discovered a complete solution to the puzzle, and so they grabbed the wallet and emptied of its tokens. I believe they were producing a write-up, but I moved on to another project and sort of answered any questions about the previous project, but I haven't actually seen their write-up yet. It's always a weird state with Torch Hearts. I was walking around the 2-year painting. I was walking around with the private key for that on my laptop to various meetups at our local crypto hacker space during that time, which I later realised was a really bad idea.
Yeah.
So I deleted that off of there and just like kept it on a couple of DVDs at the back of a cupboard. So with this, with the latest puzzle, I was much more security minded, and having to switch between being incredibly careful not to leak a single bit of information about it, with answering questions from this amazing community about, is this a bug? No. Is this meant to be like this? If I tell them it's not a bug, will this leak information about the puzzle? If I tell them it's meant to be like this, will I be guiding them towards the solution? And obviously, your human reaction is you just want to help people, but security thinking leads you in the other direction, and it's a difficult balance. But because of that sort of more security mindedness, I wasn't really tracking things about it online, so I haven't seen the puzzle solution is out, yes or not, but I do believe someone was assembling one.
Yeah, I'm astonished that you actually kept up that report between the. But then again, I guess it's building that social value in that whole project, isn't it? But yeah, no, I don't know if I could do it, to be honest. That all that responsibility would be too much.
I'm very lucky never to have been the front person for any of these projects. I've not been the representative. So Marguerite and now Josie has always been the public face of the project and has fielded or taken the brunt, depending on how you look at it, of the public attention. So I'm very grateful to them for that and for giving me the opportunity to do what I love, more or less behind the scenes, and for them to take on the public-facing role.
So I guess moving sites forward ever so slightly, what excites you the most about the fusion of blockchain technologies and the interactive medium that is video gaming?
So it comes back again to what is similar rather than different between blockchain and open source free software. They are both ways of making sure that you don't lose what is yours. With open source software, with free software, people cannot say, you cannot use that software that you have purchased from us or downloaded and you are running on a computer, stop it, you can never use that ever again. With blockchain, with true digital ownership of game assets, of shares in in-game companies, of all the different skins and equipment that your characters have, of the characters and any other elements of games that can be tokenized, you own that and no one can take it away from you. So in both cases, you've got very different, but nonetheless fairly absolute and very, very thorough forms of ownership, which allow you to invest your time, your effort, your emotions, your money in these communities, in these products, in these shared experiences, in these ways of working and playing together. And at the end of the day, someone can't come and say, I'm turning off the lights. And that's really fundamental to what I see as the value in blockchain gaming. I think there's exciting opportunities in sort of moving the rules online, although obviously with the way current mainnet blockchains work, that would be prohibitively expensive for anything other than sort of the simplest of games. And I think sort of taking the metaverse approach much further is enabled by true digital ownership. And I think sort of reaching ever deeper into the very elements of the characters and equipment in the world and just tokenizing everything, not quite down to the atomic level, but certainly to the level where you can remix what you own much more thoroughly than you ever could before. These are all things which do genuinely and very deeply excite me about blockchain gaming's opportunities for making something more interesting, more engaging by just doing what games do well and doing what blockchain does well and mixing them up together.
So the tipping point with towards asset sovereignty is just a matter of time, you think?
Even with what we've done with Plasma Bears, with Neon District, you have the convenience of running most of the game on sidechain, and then you have the ownership of being able to move stuff off of that sidechain at any point onto the Ethereum mainnet, and there, your ownership of these tokens is as thorough as it can be, unless someone breaks public key cryptography any time before we get quantum supremacy. So it's it's there at the gross level, at the at sort of at the object level of a character or a weapon or a vehicle. I just want to see it go so much further. I want you to be able to take the wheels off the car and change its spark plug, and for this to all be tokenized. And that's, as I say, that's obviously not something you could do with current mainnets, but people are coming up with interesting ways of using zero knowledge proofs to bundle up large amounts of information and represent this with the same security as if you had placed all of the information online. So yeah, that's sort of those developments together with, I guess, hyper tokenization, they're really exciting.
I mean, much like the broader art world, I guess you talk to people about what is the kind of, exactly relay the conversation that we're having here, and people don't realize that this stuff can actually happen at this point in time. So yeah, it does seem quite distant, but it's definitely very real.
Yes. Yeah. Did you see that there was a scandal about an artist, and I can't remember the name, sorry, artist, that they taped a banana to the wall of a gallery.
Yeah,
I've sold this for tens of thousands of dollars. And I like, as someone with a background in art and a background in art history and thorough knowledge of where they're coming from, I loved that. I also loved all of the meme responses to it, which were really hilarious, and I loved the token responses to it, where people were sort of saying, I've tokenized this banana, it's not going to rot and fall off the wall, this is clearly much better than the banana that's just taped to the wall. But that artwork, and sort of people hearing me say this who don't have a sort of big emotional investment in the history of 20th century art, are perfectly welcome to say it's not an artwork. I don't think a banana taped to a wall is an artwork. But if that is something you are willing to accept as an artwork, then the thing that proves that you own that artwork is the little bit of paper with the artist's signature on, saying, I certify that you are one of the purchasers of this artwork. And that is what you then, as a collector, use to show that you have actually purchased this artwork in any meaningful way. And it's what you sell when you sell the artwork. And if you lose the bit of paper, if it burns in a fire, if it gets stolen, some artists and some artists' estates will replace that. I think it's fair to say most of them won't, because it's the artwork. If your Picasso burns down, you don't get a copy of Picasso. If your piece of paper certifying that you own the banana burns down, you don't get a replacement piece of paper. And you can see very obviously where blockchain, where smart contracts, where any kind of ownership system that you can manage with something that can't burn down sort of could, in theory, be very, very useful for this kind of thing. And there's so much crossover in the technology and even some players between blockchain collectibles, blockchain games, and blockchain certification of art. And it will be interesting to see whether this will open up the art world's mind to the idea that actually there is real art in the gaming space, and to see whether sort of gamers will sort of open up to the possibilities of contemporary art with all its bananas taped to walls.
Yeah, it's like at a macro level.
Treat everything as a token and share them.
Yeah, it's like on a macro level. If you're, if the game that you've invested potentially hundreds of pounds or dollars in decides to shut up shop, then that's your equivalent Picasso burning down, isn't it? Well, maybe not, but in some people's eyes.
Yeah, and I think it depends how much you like Picasso. It depends how much you like gaming. I think that's part of Vitalik's origin story, wasn't it?
Yes, the WoW ban.
Yeah, so yes, So like we're not saying anything new here. We're just filling in the details and sort of making it real and making it robust and fleshing out the possibilities.
So moving forward, this is a bit of a diversion away, but what would your blank check project be outside of any foreseeable home improvements in the future?
I would love to take some of the innovations we've come up with at Blockade onto the standard track. We've done some amazing things with token IDs, with cross-chain movement of assets. We've done lots of good stuff there. We simply haven't had time, sort of whilst making all that stuff, to sort of take it out to the world and say, hey, so here's how this works, and it'd be, you know, great if you could see if you think this is of use to you, and we could standardize on it and then grow this metaverse that we're all working on even more and even more quickly. So I'd love to have time to do that. I'd love to be able to sort of really press the accelerator on hyper tokenization and have a project where you can break down assets sort of deeper and deeper and deeper, not quite to the atomic scale, but just sort of find ways of leveraging the sort of combined creativity of the sort of digital art world, the digital gaming world, and the sort of both the game company side and the player side of these different groups who are used to very much making things their own and repurposing them and just unleashing that creativity on a deeper level than ever before. And beyond that, I don't know, maybe buy some early crypto kitties and frame them, or see if I could bid on the bus and take that in a new plot direction. I don't know. The possibilities are endless, but those are the ones that spring immediately to mind.
Yeah, I can't think of what I would do if I had that. Yeah, it probably would fall along the same side of what you're saying with yeah, it would be scaling up a dream project at Blockade to really showcase. I mean, going to game event or game conferences, it's always, you know, the question that's always you know, asked is when will this technology have its Super Mario moment? And it would be working on a project that really defines that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like Super Mario had a series of moments. So you go from sort of Donkey Kong through NES Mario, and then sort of the world goes crazy for Super Mario, and then sort of Mario 3D. I remember seeing a list of the best games of all time at the turn of the millennium, and I think number one was the Nintendo 64 Zelda, and number two was Mario 64, and that's a succession of Mario moments. But if you look back from the Nintendo 64 running around in a little virtual world with Mario to Donkey Kong, we've got like about 8 pixels in orange jerking along the cathode ray tube, then that doesn't look like a Mario moment, but you know, you wouldn't have got to the later stuff without that. So I think, you know, we've seen amazing things already in gaming. I think Blockade has genuinely brought us some of those moments. Obviously, there are other great projects and other people have done great stuff, but I think, yeah, you know, it's not so much that we need that moment. We need to sort of actually pause for a moment, recognize the moments we've already had, and then look towards the Super Nintendo Mario moments and the Nintendo 64 Mario moments, and just sort of get there as soon as possible, because I want to see what it's.
It will happen. It will happen one day.
Yeah.
Somewhere. Brilliant. So I guess to kind of bring this podcast, if you could call it, or presentation to some form of closure. One of the final things that I've got here is a bit of a run through of so people have watched this, they really like what we're talking about, they might not necessarily know too much about what's being talked about, they want to know a little bit more. I have actually, I'm sure you've got all of these to hand on your side, but yeah, as you said, this piece in particular, the artists rethinking the blockchain, certainly your essay in here as well is probably I think one of the certainly working with this technology, it's easy to just go straight in really deep in terms of you're consuming the talk of academics very, very fast. But the way that you phrase it in here, in terms of lining up the history and the social implications, and all the way to the real pivotal moments leading us up to kind of, I guess, the position where we are now, is really, really well defined in this. And in terms of actually lining up the rest of the book as well, in terms of all of the other case studies then presented after, no, it's a really, really great kind of reference and comprehensive look. So yeah, this has definitely got my thumbs up. Yeah, so as you said, and it's open as well. You can legally, you can freely even download the PDF. Yeah, so it's definitely worth having a look at. You've also got other pieces. Another one that sprung to mind. I had a load of these actually sent to the office, which I now can't access for obvious reasons. But the Genesis piece actually it is the most simplest of the ones that I ordered, but it also is probably the most enjoyable reading back, because I think you've got what is it like?
It's fun. So I have no poetry in my soul. I'm not a poet. I know some very skilled and eloquent poets, and my apologies to them for anything I've ever done which I've had the temerity to describe as poetry. But Genesis takes the top 100. Is it top 100? Yeah. So it takes the top 100 coins by market capitalization on Bitcoin's birthday a couple of years ago. I found the Genesis blocks for all of them. Some of them were actually quite hard to track down, and then just rendered them in the same. So took the numbers of these Genesis blocks from their data. So, if you have them in hex, it's AF23B102, and rendered this in the same way that Bitcoin wallets are rendered. So BIP39 words, where you chop things up, and sort of if the number is 0, it's abandon, and you go on from there. And you end up with this not quite nonsense poem, which seems really, really, really evocative in some way. And the Bitcoin one, because it starts with a long string of zeros for the difficulty, it starts abandon, 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 which sounds like this very, very expressionist.
It's quite a Shakespearean
poem starts off. Yes, yeah. I realised I was saying that in my Shakespearean voice there. So that's quite fun, and it's all to get across to people that you may not understand the sort of deep data structures of this. You may not have read the code. I've certainly not read the code of 100 different blockchain projects, but there's some sort of structure here. There's some sort of information here. Here is a model that you can grab onto, so you don't have to wonder what's going on here, and you can think about a genesis block of blockchain as this sort of poetic originating event of it that you can render in not quite in verse, but I guess in blank verse. And think that the Blockchain Aesthetics project is the visual equivalent of that. It just renders transactions or blocks on different blockchains in the abstract style of popular modern and postmodern painters. So you can have like coloured squares, coloured dots. It does the same sort of poetry stanza style encoding as well. And it's all just to give people a model and then a way into this, because that's how I sort of built a model of it and found a way into it myself.
And there was one, or there was a book that you had to hand on your side that you'd recommended just before we opened up this conversation.
Oh yes. So during the NetArt era of the 90s and 2000s, one of the institutions in America which did a lot of work to establish NetArt institutionally was Rhizome in New York, and they published a collection last year called The Art Happens Here. NetArt Anthology is deliberately cut off here because graphic design. And they were kind enough to put my simple blockchain art diagram in it, which is a remix of a picture by a couple of artists called MTAA. And they, back in the 90s, produced a satirical picture called the simple net art diagram, which is like a network diagram of two Macintoshes talking to each other with a big arrow pointing at the network cable saying, the art happens here, which is a response to precisely the kinds of problems that we talked about with blockchain art and existing institutions happening back in the day for net art and existing institutions. It's like you're on mailing lists or websites, where does the art happen? It's like, well, the art happens here on the network. So a few years ago, they released that under a free culture license, under one of the Creative Commons licenses. So I was free to take that resource and chop some bits off and move it around and make a diagram of some blocks with, again, the arrow pointing at one of the blocks saying the art happens here. So I put that on the blockchain. I put the hash of that on the Bitcoin blockchain and made an image of that, and it's in the book next to this simple net art diagram, because they've got lots and lots of different pictures of remixes of that. But yeah, mine's next to the original, so that was fun.
So you've got a brilliant website, in fact, and there is a link on that site that lists a few. I don't know whether that particular one's on there, but all the ones that we had a look at before are on there. So I would highly recommend, like, this one alone. In fact, if you are going to start, that one is a very, very good start. I guess, in the broader sense of term. If you're intrigued about what we've been talking about, then this one is a great one to start on.
It's got some great stuff in there. It covers things like Primavera de Felipe's Plantoid, like the Terra Zero project. These are all genuinely, I guess, economically interesting, sort of crypto-economically interesting ways of sort of using the blockchain to fund and make art, or art to make protecting a bit of forest as an autonomous organisation, sort of something that you can talk about and think about and make work. So yeah, there's lots of good stuff in there, and I'm really pleased to be in there.
So final question, a very fitting question, actually, being the current time that we find ourselves in. So lastly, are there any public galleries or exhibitions that you're currently, or at least for the foreseeable future, featured in?
No, sadly not. I dropped the ball a bit at the end of the last year. So as with anything, sort of art shows are organised a bit ahead of time, and I was very busy with Blockade at the end of last year, so I wasn't hassling people to put me in shows. And there was one show in China that was coming up, but with everyone going into pandemic lockdown, the art that I've always made to basically be seen online is now best and only able to be seen online. So there's nothing coming up just yet, but hopefully either institutions will get used to exhibiting online, and then I'll be able to have more stuff in online shows, or people will start having physical shows again, and we can start working out how to squeeze things that you have to use MetaMask to interact with onto a tablet in a gallery.
So watch this space. Or virtual space. Brilliant. Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Rob, and no doubt, be sure to follow this up in when we achieve the next project further down the line, or when what you've been working on in the background comes to fruition. So yeah, I guess final note, a bit of a public service announcement would probably be, everyone watching, feel free to approach us online. We are not necessarily socially distanced online, so drop messages in the Discord, and we'd be more than happy to pitch in where necessary, or point you in the right direction, or spill the beans on certain things. Outside of that, stay at home, save lives, and we'll inform you about any future developments here at Blockade. Have a great day.